Most mom and pop investors keep it simple. They identify 3 or fewer properties. When you identify 3 or fewer properties, you're not constrained by a value cap. You could identify the Sears Tower in Chicago, the Empire State Building, and the IDS Center in Minneapolis. These are 3 properties. Doesn't matter that they're extremely expensive properties, they're 3 or fewer properties. If, however, you're going to identify more than 3 properties, you're going to identify a property in Wisconsin, Ohio, Florida, Texas. Non-contiguous parcels, more than 3. You can do that, but the total aggregate value of all of your identified properties cannot exceed twice the value of what you relinquished. If you sold a property for $10 million, you can list up to $20 million of replacement properties. Is that enough bandwidth for you? Probably. However, if you'd sold a property for $100,000, now your cap is $200K. Is that enough bandwidth? Probably not. You'd better off using the 3 property rule, constraining yourself down. Well, here's where it gets hairy. By the way, there's one other seldom used rule, the 95% rule. I don't want to talk about it too much, but it's typically used in big portfolio purchases of oil and gas and mineral interests. If you're buying a huge portfolio and one of the wells runs dry and you decide not to buy it, no matter, doesn't matter, as long as you're getting 95% of the total value of everything that you identified, your exchange is still valid. So you want to buy 16 CVS drugstores? Great. But if one of those deals falls out of bed, you might fall beneath the 95% threshold and be shot in the foot. Here's where it gets crazy. Some Delaware statutory trusts, DSTs, are comprised of a multitude of components. It's got a lot of assets in it. Might have 6, 7, 10 properties. You may blow yourself out of the 3 property contention just by identifying that one multi-property DST. Nobody really knows for certain whether a DST is one property for identification purposes because it's one trust, or if a DST is the sum of all of its component parts. In conventions and meetings that I've had with the IRS attorneys, off the record, they've told me they think a DST that has a multitude of properties is the sum of its parts. It's not one property for identification. It's a multitude of properties. But there's been no reported cases, tax court cases. That was just off-the-cuff remarks. Okay, so to be careful, you're going to identify a DST from Morgan Stanley. You want to talk to your advisor and ask them how many component parts are in this property. If the advisor says, oh, it's just one asset, perhaps it's a Amazon distribution center in Ohio. That's one property. Okay, great. I like a single asset DST because it still only takes up one slot under the 3 property rule. If, however, the advisor gets back to you and says, oh yeah, that's comprised of like 6, 7 properties in all these different states. It's like a little REIT, a mini portfolio. Then you have to say, all right, well, I'm probably under the 200% rule. Now I've got to really sharpen the pencil and add up the value of all of the properties I'm identifying. The next question that you ask your advisor is, if I put $1 into this DST, how much of the underlying debt might I be allocated as part of that purchase? If it's a 50% levered DST, 50% equity, 50% debt, that means every dollar I put in equates to $2 of buying power. So when I'm computing the value of my DST that I'm buying, I would say I'm buying a beneficial interest in such and such DST comprised of $100,000 of equity for a total purchase value of $200,000, and that's the number, the $200,000, that counts for the computing of the 200%. I got to make sure that when I add any additional acquisitions or replacement properties to my identification list, it's not kicking me over my 200% ceiling, and I have to count the debt.